Hey Jazz Nation, welcome to another 5-minute fight against racism. Everybody knows the Jazz are a small market team. The US Census Bureau says Utah has about 3.2 million people. 18 NBA teams have more people living in their home cities than we have in our entire state. Out of that 3.2 million, only 1.5% of Utahns are black, which raises the question, are we the whitest fan base in the NBA? Judging by the big screen at Vivint, it certainly seems so. Let's take a look at the map. Utah is not the whitest state in the United States. We're the 18th whitest. 18 out of 50. When it comes to homes of NBA teams, Indiana ranks higher than Utah at number 15, and Wisconsin is whitest at number 12. But these numbers don't tell the whole story. Indiana may be more white overall, but there are more black people in the city of Indianapolis, where the Pacers play, than the whole state of Utah. There are more black people in the city of Milwaukee, where the Bucks play, than in Utah. About 6 times as many black people in each of those cities. When Memphis Mike became Mountain Mike, he left behind a city with 10 times as many black people as our state. To put it in perspective, half of all the black people in Utah live in Salt Lake City. About 20,000, or enough to fill Vivint 1.25 times. Right now I'm focusing on black and white because we're talking NBA, and black players make up about 75% of the league. But we also need to keep in mind Utah's home to people of many races and ethnicities. The term people of color can also refer to Hispanic and Latinx, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Chinese, Japanese, and many more. Still, if we include all minorities in our population count, Utah's about 77% white. 1 in 66 people are black. So it's kind of amazing that Utah isn't the whitest state. There are 17 states with more white people per capita. But you've probably realized by now that when we limit our search to places with NBA teams and break down the numbers, it's possible that our small market team has the fewest black fans compared to any other NBA team. The bottom line, Utah isn't a very racially diverse state. Growing up here in the suburbs, I didn't know very many black kids. Psychologists say that people who live in less diverse places like this come to see their own race as the unexamined norm. White has been my own assumed baseline. I didn't even grow up thinking of myself as a white person. And it still feels a bit awkward to call myself a white person. When I hear the phrase racial issues, my mind first thinks of people of color, even now. That is racial. Me, I'm just me. I was way more likely to see a black person on the TV show Cops than sitting across the lunch table from me growing up. Being exposed to stereotypes like that leaves an impact too. Sure, racial separation isn't unique to Utah. Study after study has shown that white Americans tend to socialize primarily with other white Americans. One prominent study discovered that 75% of white people have entirely white social networks. And beyond the social networks, for white people, our unexamined whiteness is also connected to cultural power. We witness predominantly white CEOs, politicians, educators, news media, and religious leaders. And here's the problem. It's difficult for me to imagine what it was like growing up black in America because I didn't grow up black in America. And I don't know very many people who did. By most measures, Utah's not a very racially diverse state, a breeding ground where stereotypes can flourish. So it's going to take extra effort for white fans like me to wrap my head around the experiences and perspectives and pains that many of my favorite NBA players have faced being black in America. That's what Royce O'Neal was talking about when he said being an NBA player doesn't shield him from being profiled or from being stereotyped. He said he wants us to remember that players are people first. A general lack of familiarity with black people might explain why a Jazz fan could casually shout at players and call them thugs, or call Russell Westbrook boy, without really understanding the racist history of that word. And even if that particular fan did understand the racist history, which would be terrible, plenty of other Jazz fans were still confused about what was so offensive about calling someone boy, something that most black people in America weren't confused about at all. When the Jazz organization penalized the racism by banning that fan from games at the arena, they sent all of us a message that we need to listen to, and that we need to vocally back up as well. The bottom line, our Jazz fan base, it's predominantly white. We're not the whitest state in the country, but we probably are the whitest fan base. We have some devout fans with many different racial backgrounds here, of course, but by sheer numbers alone, we're probably whitest. And that's why it's our responsibility as fans to close the understanding gap in order to close the empathy gap. Too many white Jazz fans resist this move, and I get it. It's uncomfortable. I've seen people say that they just want to pay for their tickets and cheer for our team and not have to think about anything else. The sport is entertainment, it's our escape. But this sport's also a player's livelihood and life, and it can be a really personal thing. So in the next 5-minute fight, we'll talk about how many black players are speaking their minds right now off the court and why they want to use the court itself to speak up more than ever. Next time, a glimpse at the history of activism in sports. Some incredible stories for anybody who's wished that players would stick to sports. All right, before we go, I want to give you your assignment for this week, and this one's simple. I'm inviting you to consciously diversify your social media feeds, like Twitter, for example. If you're already following me at Anti-Racist Jazz, you've probably noticed that I've been tweeting out some recommended follows. Journalists, activists, educators, and other people of color who can bring fresh perspective to your feed. So go diversify your social media feeds. We'll see you next time on 5-Minute Fights.